How we doing? We're about to go live here on Facebook. 3, 2, 1. We are live on Instagram. We are live on Facebook. Good morning, y'all. My name is Dustin Jones, one of two lead faculty within the older adult division, and you are listening to the PT on Ice Daily Show. Top of the morning to you. Today we're going to be talking about ensuring results with monitoring. Ensuring results with monitoring. Today on Jerry on Ice. Today is Wednesday. That means it's also Hump Day. Hump Day Hustle is about to go out in about 30 minutes. Jeff Moore, the CEO of the Institute of Clinical Excellence, puts together an amazing email every single Wednesday with at least 5 super helpful links, whether it's a research article, social media post, podcast, whatever it is that the faculty have found helpful in their work. And he shares that with thousands upon thousands upon thousands of y'all, of clinicians. And I really enjoy that. I know many of you all do as well. If you don't get that email, just head over to ptonice.com and there's a Hump Day Hustle tab and you can click and get on that. In terms of what's up with MMOA or Modern Management of the Older Adult, Alex Tremont and I were just out in Bozeman, Montana at Excel Physical Therapy for an awesome course. Amazing crew. Got some awesome trail runs in, and then had a hell of a time getting out of there thanks to the snow and all the flight cancellations. But we're back. We're getting after it. We're going to be on the road again in, I believe, a couple weeks, beginning of November. Going to be up around Akron, Ohio. And then we have a couple private courses, and then we're hitting the ground running starting in 2022. So I would be sure to check out our schedule because we're probably going to be pretty close to y'all in your neck of the woods. We've got 2 online cohorts starting, Essential Foundations and Advanced Concepts. Those are both sold out, so we're ending the year strong, and those are going to run up again. Essential Foundations will start the first week of January, and then Advanced Concepts won't be running again until May of 2022, so we're super excited about that. All right, ensuring results with monitoring. Let's get into the goods, shall we? Got some folks here on Instagram, watching on Facebook as well. So what I want to talk about today is a very, can be a challenging situation, right? Where you may do your initial assessment, you may kind of get an idea, a good baseline assessment of where someone is right now. What may be good for them as well. And especially when we're talking about working with older adults, oftentimes our intervention is going to be some type of exercise. The vast majority of individuals are going to benefit from some type of strength training, some type of properly dosed exercise. And we work our hardest to kind of gather that baseline within the first few visits, and we establish our plan. And the very unfortunate thing is, once you start working with real life people, the plan that you start with is hardly ever the plan that you end with. That is always fluctuating, it is always changing, and it's very dynamic. It's not this static, set in stone plan of care that you established on day one from this nice, crisp assessment. It's always changing. It's always fluctuating. And for some, that can be rather challenging and difficult. For others, it makes it fun. I really enjoy that side of things where you're having to take in all kinds of different variables and tweak your plan to suit that person in that particular moment to achieve a particular goal. And so these plans are often dynamic. They're not necessarily static. And so in order to ensure that they continue to be effective to achieve a particular goal, we have to be adaptable. In order to be adaptable, we have to observe and monitor our patient's response to what we're doing. Now, I know this is nothing new. Y'all are doing this on a daily basis, but I just want to talk us through some things that we want to think about that some of you all are doing, many of you all are not, based on a lot of the conversations that we're having in a lot of these courses, in order to make sure our dynamic plans are really suiting that person well. So I just want to speak to this, or I want to share kind of an example of why this is important. And I don't know if many of you all have felt this before, but there have been several times for me, especially in the context of home health. So if any home healthers out there, you're feeling this pain right now of people are getting discharged sooner and sooner and sooner out of the hospital into the home. And so these people that are at a relatively high level of care, under 24/7 supervision, are getting booted out of this hospital into a home. And in many instances, there's hardly any social support, a very difficult situation. And then home health comes in and you're kind of handed this situation that you have to manage to make sure that person doesn't go back into the hospital, and that you don't, cause any harm, and ultimately that you help them get better. With some people, it's pretty straightforward, right? With others, it's not at all. I think of, I used to have a pretty large caseload of folks that had some type of heart surgery or some type of heart condition that they would be managed. They were in the hospital, and then they'd come to home health. And in those instances, when you're trying to execute a lot of the research, looking at higher intensity exercise, strength training, aerobic training, all that fun stuff that we talk about on this podcast, it's typically higher intensities than what people are used to. And it can be very, very easy in that moment to let the fear creep in, to start to get a little fearful, to see that individual that has been through literally, hell and back for some, that perceivably they may be a little bit unstable. It's very easy to let the thoughts creep in when you're trying to send it, when you're trying to push to that 7, 8 out of 10 intensity, that you could literally kill that person. Now, I know some of y'all have thought about this. We talk about this in our live course, but it's very easy to think about that. When you're pushing people to an appropriate intensity to promote adaptation based on evidence, it's very easy to let that thought creep in that you're going to hurt this individual, whether they just fall dead on the spot, whether you cause a stroke or whatever thought creeps in. It's very easy to let that creep in. And one of the best ways to combat that and ensure that you're at an appropriate intensity is to actually observe and monitor that individual. So I want to hear, do y'all feel me with that? I feel sometimes I get a lot of sympathy there. Other times people are like, yeah, whatever. I never had that thought. I'd love to hear y'all's thoughts on that. But anyway, let's get into what to think about. So I think for many of you all, especially the outpatient orthopedic clinicians, you're dealing with individuals that have pain. They are rather irritable individuals. That is something that you are monitoring, right? Their irritability. If you've been to any ICE course, you hear about the symptom behavior model, that we are assessing and leveraging the behavior of those symptoms to inform our exercise dosage, what we may do, what we may not do. And we can observe that irritability through a question, just getting a subjective pain report, or our asterisk signs, right, that we gather in our initial evaluation, that you can use those asterisk signs to kind of assess, all right, how is my intervention really impacting this particular individual? We talk about that a lot. Many of you outpatient clinicians are doing that on the regular. Now, in terms of our exercise, what we may want to think about based on people's response, there's a couple big things that we can do in order to keep people moving, continue that progress forward. And two of those that are the most common that we're going to use, especially in older adults, is with a particular exercise, especially when we're talking about strength training, is we can adjust the load, obviously. Adjust how much load that we have, but also the position of the load. Where is the load and that force being dispersed across the body? Because if irritability is on board and we may be causing an increase in irritability, we may want to lower load a little bit, adjust that, or maybe think about how we're applying that load to not transfer force to a particular area that may be causing elevated irritability. So load is one. Very simple. We do this all the time. Another one, is range of motion. This one is rather potent because you're able to potentially reduce the range of motion of an activity that may be elevating irritability and still allow people to participate, which is rather potent. And that's what we want. Very common in older adults, especially with a lot of folks that have NEOA is a classic example. When we're trying to get people moving, weight-bearing activities, working on squats, deadlifts, things of that nature, that we can reduce the range of motion to where it's acceptable to them and continue to apply load, and we'll be able to progress that down the road. So symptom behavior model, irritability, y'all have that on lockdown. Number two, what I want to talk about is effort. Effort. Two types of effort, right? They're reported effort and then your observed effort that person is demonstrating. So when people report their effort, that RPE, that rating of perceived exertion, whether you're using the full-blown board, modified RPE, something like the OmniRes, that's very helpful, right? Especially initially on in a course of care. When we're talking about someone that may be rather irritable, that if they're in the driver's seat and they are performing an activity where they're saying it's rather challenging and they have a relatively higher RPE, when they're in the driver's seat, that can often help you avoid a potential flare-up or an elevation in irritability. And that's a good thing, right? However, there comes a time when someone's perceived effort doesn't necessarily match reality. It could be the opposite, but usually it's where people are perceiving that they're working extremely, extremely hard, but in reality, they're not. It's not a high intensity effort. This is very common in many older adults that we work with, especially that are new to exercise. When we're saying a 7, 8 out of 10, they may not necessarily have a reference for that. And in their mind, they're getting after it. But in reality, they are capable of way much more. And so we can use their reported effort, or RPE, to help prevent a potential flare-up. And that can be very helpful, especially early on. But then we want to really leverage our perceived effort, how we're observing their effort with a particular activity, which can ultimately prevent underdosage. And that's something that we really want to think about. So the symptom behavior model, irritability, that's what we want to monitor. We want to monitor their effort. Also, we want to monitor their mechanics with a particular movement. This is very applicable, especially when we're trying to build strength. And the big thing here that I like to focus on is there a big difference from when they started to when they're finishing a particular activity or a particular set? Is there a big difference in their mechanics in that particular movement? And if so, that may mean, all right, we're at a pretty high intensity here. That may be a good thing. But based on kind of the points of performance of an activity, we may want to adjust that activity. But we want to be aware, what's the difference between how they're moving between the beginning of the set and at the end of the set? And that can give you a good idea of if you need to tweak what you're doing in terms of dosage or the activity. All right, so irritability, effort, mechanics, and last but not least, vital signs, y'all. Vital signs. This is definitely pertinent to that. A lot of those folks that I would work with, especially in the home setting, is that you have this perception that, man, their blood pressure is absolutely through the roof. Their heart's pounding out their chest. They could die any second. Those thoughts can creep in, but you can calm them down by objectively measuring how they're responding to activity. So obviously, we want to take vitals as a baseline. We've talked about that enough. Let's do that, all right? Especially for working with older adults. But we want to monitor that during activity and then afterwards to see if their response is appropriate and considered normal. Heart rate, that's a very easy one. We can do that manually. Do it before, during, and after. When I say during, obviously if they're doing a very dynamic activity, that can be rather challenging. What can be helpful here is when we structure in a little bit of rest into activities. So something like an EMOM is a great opportunity to be able to gather some vitals as people are resting, or high intensity interval training, if you will. That can allow you to be able to gather that data during activity. So heart rate, rather simple. Blood pressure is very, very helpful here. I would not recommend the automatic wrist cuff. I tried that, and that is not the most accurate for sure. There's some interesting research on that as well that's showing that those wrist cuffs are really not that great in being able to get an accurate reading and even to be able to perceive trends in blood pressure. So a good old manual cuff before, during, maybe during a rest period of that EMOM or some type of interval work that you're doing, and then afterwards to ensure that that person is that they're in kind of that safe zone and they're having a response to activity. And then last but not least, oxygen saturation. A good old pulse ox that can be very, very helpful for individuals and helpful for you to get a good idea of their response. Heart rate can be somewhat reliable, so you can make sure that people are having an elevated response. And then oxygen saturation, which is going to be more and more important, especially with folks that you're working with that have had COVID-19. This is something that can be very helpful for them and for you to be able to dose your activity to where their oxygen saturation is staying within an acceptable level. So you're not guessing, and you actually know what's going on inside. And we consider all these things, their irritability, their effort, whether it's their reported effort or perceived effort, their mechanics of a particular movement at the beginning and at the end of a particular set, and vitals. You're getting a big picture of how someone is performing this activity and if it's at an appropriate intensity. And based on that information, you can make adjustments, whether what you prescribed is too difficult or maybe too easy, or you just go along that plan because you crushed it on day 1, 2, or 3. I don't know. You never know. That's the beautiful part about this. Every day is going to be different. And so we really want to have that perspective that our initial plans of care, that initial assessment, that was one data point, and it's going to change. It's dynamic. It's not static. And we can leverage monitoring to make sure that we stay dialed in. I'm going to publish a social media post that's going to be associated with this, where I'm going to give some parameters for those vital sign responses, because I know sometimes those can be easy to forget. So be sure to check that out. That'll be on my page. It's going to go on the ICE page as well. I'll be sure to link that in the Facebook video. All right. Would love to hear your all's thoughts on this. Any other thing that you want to contribute to the conversation, or if you've had those moments where you thought you were literally going to kill a patient, I want to hear some sympathy here. Let me know if you've had those thoughts cross your mind. Hit us up on Instagram. Hit us up on Facebook. We appreciate y'all for tuning in. Y'all have a lovely Wednesday, and I will talk to y'all soon. See ya.
Hey, thanks for tuning in to the PT on Ice Daily Show. If you enjoyed this content, head on over to iTunes and leave us a review. And be sure to check us out on Facebook and Instagram at the Institute of Clinical Excellence. If you're interested in getting plugged into more ICE content on a weekly basis while earning CEUs from home, check out our virtual ICE online mentorship program at ptonice.com. While you're there, sign up for our Hump Day Hustling newsletter for a free email every Wednesday morning with our top 5 research articles and social media posts that we think are worth reading. Head over to ptonice.com and scroll to the bottom of the page to sign up.